Ole, 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 ole. Ole, ole. Ole, 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 ole. Ole, ole.
Hello and welcome to Homegrown, the Soccer Yanks home for domestic soccer. I am your host, Dan DeRocha, and with me, the brain behind Homegrown, the executive producer, my good friend and compatriot, fellow American, Jason Sierra.
I am proud to be an American today, Dan.
More than ever, right? More than ever, because we are spearheading the fight to clean up soccer.
Or football, as the rest of the world calls it.
Of course. So, we usually do our monthly podcast, our Homegrown. We talk about a variety of U.S. soccer issues, MLS, NASL, U.S. Open Cup. We had a whole show planned out this evening. And this morning, all hell broke loose in the footballing global landscape with heavy implications for the U.S. And we just had to scrap the whole show, and we're gonna spend a little bit of time tonight talking about the FIFA corruption investigations being led, or at least in part, by the U.S. Department of Justice.
Yeah, after hearing the stories and hearing more and more, after I was reading the stories on lunchtime at work, the New York Times broke the story. They've been doing constant reporting on it. That whatever we had written down, it kind of felt like there was a before and after this story, and I just kind of felt like the games didn't matter. The Europa League trial was today. I kind of didn't care. By the way, Sevilla won 3-2. If anyone else cared, the Talent Cup started today. U.S. got their butts handed to them by France. Didn't really care about that either. It just felt like this was the story, and everything else was secondary. Even play on the field and everything else, which obviously shouldn't be, but here we are.
So, all right, in case you've been living underneath a rock, just a very, very quickly, Jay, how did you hear about this, and what exactly are we, just the little details of what are we talking about here?
How did I hear? I woke up this morning. I usually throw on the CBS News in the morning, that or Al Jazeera America, and CBS News led off with the story, about soccer, which was a little bit surprising. And they led off talking to the reporter for the New York Times, who was the individual on Twitter who was taking the pictures from the hotel in Zurich, and they didn't have a very in-depth conversation with the individual, but I think it was Mike Smith. Didn't bring up a whole lot of details at his end. There was a whole robust conversation, but because it was in the process of happening, because we just heard that essentially these people were arrested. In total, it was 7, if I'm mistaken, 7 people arrested from FIFA in total. 9 current former members indicted, and then 4 marketing executives for the United States were indicted. This is not about the World Cups coming up. At least not this story is about the World Cup. But what's happening with the United States is they are investigating bribery in terms of marketing. The marketing of the sport in the United States, television rights, sponsorship rights. So this doesn't touch the World Cup yet. It doesn't touch Sepp Blatter yet. This is a very regional North America, South America thing.
I got a similar story. I mean, this morning just came across. I happened to be getting my car. I was at my car dealership getting it serviced, and I just happened to be sitting in the waiting room. It was just an oil change, so it was supposed to be pretty quick. And we had the local cable news. And, one of those like news channels that just repeats the same 5 stories every 15 minutes. And they led off, same like you. Department of Justice indicts 14 individuals related to FIFA corruption. And I'm like, what? And I immediately went to my phone. I think I read a Wall Street Journal article on it. Started digging around. We learned about pretty much the same exact things that you had talked about. It does cover, though, it doesn't cover World Cups in the future, meaning this investigation doesn't cover the voting issues of 2018, 2022, but it might implicate 2016 Copa America, the 94 World Cup, any other tournaments or international friendlies that were held in North America and South America, I think. So there's that potentially was funneled through the U.S., the bribing. So this is, we don't know how far-reaching this is going to go.
Yeah, this actually goes back 24 years. from what I understand it to be, there was a story about 6 months ago with Chuck Blazer, the former head of CONCACAF, who was arrested and basically has been the source of most of the information. That's why it's a very much a North American, South American thing, CONCACAF CONMEBOL thing. Similar to as when the Mitchell report came out with baseball, with the steroid use, and it was a lot about New York Yankees and the New York Mets, is because the sources were from those clubhouses and from those players. The source for this one is mostly Chuck Blazer, and we won't be surprised. I won't be surprised if it comes out that the U.S. had to pay a little bit money to get the World Cup in 1994. Just like we had to do for the Olympics in Salt Lake. If anybody forgot about that, it's just how the way these things work. We're not immune from it. But as of right now, our current head, Sunil Gulati, is immune from it right now. He's not been charged for anything. But that's why it's focused mostly on this region and not in Europe or in Asia or in Africa or in the Middle East, where we're all expecting it to come from, the briberies to come from.
Well, yeah, I think that's the misconception. I think that early on the misconception was, what, the United States is meddling in soccer? I mean, what do they even care? Nobody in their country cares. And the reality is, it's Chuck Blazer was brought up on tax evasion charges a few years back. And I think he's gravely ill, as I read somewhere. So maybe he didn't want to spend his last days in a cell somewhere. So he turned up. He turned into state's witness and started saying, "Hey, by the way, there's other guys that did what I did and worse." And he started naming names, and then the ball kept rolling. I think for the Department of Justice, we have to also consider the political ramifications. I think some people can make a name for themselves by bringing down a major corruption ring. Although maybe in the American public it may not be huge, but it is a massive organization. With $5 billion in revenues over the last 4 years and $1 billion in reserves right now. That's something that you could put on your resume or your CV, as they say over in Europe, that you could hang your hat on.
Yeah, I mean, right now the face of this for the Justice Department is Loretta Lynch, who has just recently been confirmed as the Justice Department chair. But this is the Eric Holder investigation. This has been going on for years. I think he's been the Attorney General for 6 years now, so I think this investigation started right around that time. And it's all based on taxes. It's all based on, you give enough money to somebody, and you're not reporting it, and you're not paying taxes on it,
Hey,
we're going after it.
Government wants their piece, man.
Exactly. So there's a lot of kickbacks and a lot of dealings, and to get sponsorships, to get marketing, I wouldn't be surprised if MLS, who lost some of their television rights and television deals, might have kind of said something to some people. Say, hey, this is a little sneaky, a little underhanded. That how this company traffic out of nowhere, right now is a major company. It's actually pled guilty. The Corporation International, which is in Brazil and the United States, and the U.S. corporation pled guilty. It's a little curious how this up and coming organization got themselves into all these properties.
Well, I mean, they've had ownership in a variety of NASL teams, I believe, correct?
Yeah, back in 2013, it might have been even a little further. They owned the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. They owned the Atlanta Silverbacks, and they owned, and as of yesterday, he is now being suspended. Aaron Davison, who is the president of Traffic United States, who is also the chairman of the NASL, they owned the Carolina Railhawks, and they've had their fingers in ASL. They kind of propped up NASL a little bit. They own the television rights for NASL, which they go through ESPN 3-4. They currently own own their TV rights and sponsorships for Copa America, the qualifiers and sponsorships for the CONCACAF, the Copa Libertadores TV rights, the Copa Sudamericana TV rights, and then the Copa Brazil TV rights. So they are at least in this region, the biggest player when it comes to television and soccer television.
Now, let me ask you a question, because do you think that these guys just figured out the racket, or there was somebody that taught them this? Because this company is a relatively newer company, from what I understand.
Yeah, I would imagine, I mean,
Does the rabbit hole keep getting deeper and deeper?
well, if you want to be a player in this situation, you kind of need to know who to talk to and need to know who to get. There, I feel almost in a way, if I say this, and I don't try to be, it seems like people in North America, essentially gringos, have a very negative opinion about South American soccer, about the soccer of the rest of the world outside of Europe as being corrupt, as being dealing. I think that's partially racist, but I also think that's, there's evidence there. And in this situation in Brazil, you're a Brazilian, you know the situation. The heads officials, they take bribes, they get paid off. They're not the most upright individuals. And I was talking to my wife, who is from South America, Peru. She said that their head of their football organization is corrupt as well, and that the government can't take them out because if the government took them out, Peru would be suspended from FIFA. FIFA essentially protects all these people from not being indicted in this situation. So I'm sure they learned it from somewhere, especially being started from South America.
It's well, I mean, even I think just maybe about a week ago, I read a report saying that the Brazil squad, the actual roster rights were sold to a marketing partner as far back as 2006. And if you're a real conspiracy head, 1998, the Brazilian people were certain that Nike made sure that Ronaldo played in that final when he was not feeling good. So I mean, yes, the corruption there. It is not a stereotype that is unfounded, for sure. And the fact that this company Traffic also has roots in Brazil. I mean, Brazil, unfortunately, when it comes to football, has a long history of just dubious behavior as far as the administration goes of football.
Well, in the statement released by the Justice Department, it said, it did not name names, but it said that a large sportswear company has provided kickbacks and possible kickbacks and bribes to Brazil. Never said who it was, but we can guess. Listen, Barack Obama was tried to push the TPP, which is the Transatlantic Trade Partnership, the TPP, Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. He went to Nike to push it 2 weeks ago. So obviously he's friendly with Nike. He's friendly with their people. So I can understand why politically they might not want to name names here. But we all know who has who's on the Brazilian shirt. Yeah. So I don't think Nike's gonna get picked up because again that's a big fish to fry, and that's a lot of resources to go after Nike for. But it's very far-reaching.
All right, so let's get into the details and what you think, and maybe what I think as well. I don't know. I feel like you're a lot more you're researched and dug into this, and I'm kind of just still in awe. My jaw's still down. I'm picking it up. What are the implications for U.S. soccer? I mean, what does it mean for us?
Well, I think first and foremost, the question for me is NASL. If looking at it domestically, what is NASL is going to happen? They lost their chairman, Andrew Davison. They one of their teams, which is they left their they said their ownership is no longer in their hands. They're separating themselves from the whole situation. But for me, NASL, whose rights owned by Traffic, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to lose a huge supporter of their organization? What's in that element for them? Other than just the basic TV stuff, but that to me is the first thing I'm wondering about. I'm curious, is that domino in NASL going to drop? Because right now they're in a situation where they're building teams quickly. I don't know how strong their floor is, though. I don't know how strong the structure is.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's funny because the NASL always was the counter to MLS, the open system, and although so this marketing company Traffic, they may be involved in the bribery, but in a way, because if we look at it from let's say let's just presume that some countries, like for example 2010 in South Africa, let's presume that they benefited from the bribery, right, from Sepp Blatter, or there's a lot of conspiracy around that as well, about getting those votes to get a World Cup in South Africa, and what that meant to South Africa. Well, Traffic, maybe, although they're getting rich in the process, maybe they were boosting up NASL to a certain extent. They were really helping to move it. They were getting the money somehow into the system. Now, if they're out and it's just based on traditional ways, was it all ghost? Like, were they being artificially boosted? It's in their best interest if they own a club, right? They own the Railhawks. If they manage the NASL TV rights. Of course, they're going to make money, but they also want the success of the league to grow, so the next time out they could sell those rights for even more. I mean, they are tied to NASL success, and now that they're out, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, I don't know. TDS, they said they suspended the club ownership and the individual Davison. Rights wise, other than negotiating the deals and maybe providing some camera equipment and producers for the individual product, I think it's kind of on autopilot right now for NASL. I don't think, however, it's a good situation for them to be without a marketing company. The second biggest one, obviously, is some from MLS, and I think MLS is currently in the position right now where they want to help out NASL, especially when they're considering pushing up USL to second division status. So this might have a very large impact on NASL and having a second division. I don't know really outside of it because it looks a little too early. But I think that's a story that's not getting reported on, obviously, by the mainstream media, because I'm sure, 90% of the people in this country, 99% of the people in this country don't even know what that is anymore. So I think they're going to ignore that stuff. So I think us as, people who are currently into soccer, currently heavily into the community, should take a real look at NASL and what they might have to go through in the next couple of years. But other than that, international soccer rights it's being sports getting the Copa America. It's what's going to happen with the Gold Cup. That's a CONCACAF event. There's no CONCACAF head right now. We're having the Copa America here next year. Are we?
Right.
I mean, are we? Do FIFA officials want to come to the United States? Do CONMEBOL officials want to come to the United States? With risk of, they might have something on them and not, and being arrested. That's a possibility.
I mean, I heard this also. I heard, on Twitter you always hear a lot of crazy things. But assuming that this investigation doesn't lead to any more indictments and doesn't bring down any further players, does the remaining body, who is likely still involved in this kind of behavior, do they now hold a vengeance against the United States? Will we never get a World Cup again? Will this actually cause a bigger rift between the U.S. and the global soccer community?
Well, why did the global soccer community felt the need to come into the United States? Money, because we've had large corporations here. They're able to operate with pretty much impunity with a lot of, and low taxes, relatively low taxes compared to the rest of the developed world, with a huge population base. They come here for money. They come here and they bring their teams over to train in the summertime for money. We still have a population, despite how bad our economy is, who can go to games once a summer, go to a big game and spend, drop, $100 on a game to come see these teams play, who watches, international football on a regular basis. Our TV rights are huge for other outside, other than MLS. MLS gets nothing. NASL gets nothing. But the rest of the world, we pay a ton of money for their TV rights. So we were essentially the ATM to the rest of the soccer world. And we've been that for the last almost, probably like almost 8 to 10 years. Are they going to stop coming here altogether because they were doing something illegally? These executives doing something illegally? Are they going to stop coming here? Maybe the ones who have something to fear will. Maybe we won't see certain teams come here, see certain nations come here to train and to play anymore. Maybe that will have an impact on our summer soccer friendlies. But What are we at this point? They're in the wrong. There's nothing the government, allegedly, we proven innocent proven guilty, allegedly. But what are we, people who know that this stuff is probably corrupt, are going to say? If FIFA wants to punish us, for what? Because the country did what everybody in the world thought was true.
I find that the most ironic of this all, though. That's what I find the most ironic of this entire situation is that it took the country that calls it soccer to do something, to actually act on what everyone has basically agreed as a foregone conclusion, that FIFA is rigged and corrupted and bribed and bought, and Europe can stand on their Apple crate and talk about how much the game, how much more important the game is for them, but they've just stood by and watched it happen for how long?
Yeah, and we're at a point right now where, again, we are very early stages, and this is only a regional thing. We don't know what's happening on the rest of the world. What's happening in Switzerland? Obviously, they have a large banking system. I don't know their banking laws. I don't know how easy they are to get information. I'm sure that FIFA is a large, well-organized shell corporation that has lots of different entities, which none of them are going to – I'm sure none of them will touch Sepp Blatter. I'm sure Sepp Blatter will be completely clean of any charges. I can't imagine that man ever, taking a bribe, because he's – what's the point of taking a bribe when you're making, tens of millions of dollars every year and not paying a dime for anything? There's no point of taking a $50,000 bribe, $100,000 bribe. That's
That's for the peons.
Right, right. So I'm almost certain he'll never get charged, and I'm sure a lot of the top people in Europe will never get charged. I'm sure FIFA, as an organization, might not get charged. They're probably so well insulated.
Now I got a question for you, and it's not really. It doesn't really fit into the homegrown theme, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's just, this topic is just so big. The election for the next president of FIFA is on Friday. Last I read, UEFA said they want to boycott the Congress and they want to boycott the vote until this gets settled. Do you think there's any chance that the Jordanian prince, I forget his name, I don't want to butcher it and I'd say the wrong name, but it's a Jordanian prince from the Asian Federation that's going against Sepp Blatter. Is there any chance that there could be a coup here and Sepp Blatter gets beat?
Well, there's two questions. First off, if Europe doesn't go, I don't know the rules of FIFA. If Europe doesn't go, will that mean that there is no quorum and they can't hold the election? If, there's more federations there are countries in Europe. So I'm just going to throw a number out. Say there's 40 European federations. We're talking about the Falkland Islands. We're talking about England. We're talking about Gibraltar. We're talking very small areas.
But they get a vote.
So if they don't show, is there a quorum? Can they hold the election if 40 countries don't go and vote? We don't know that. And if those 40 countries go and vote, and they all go vote for against Blatter, that's not gonna be enough. He's already established the fact that when you give everybody who is part of the FIFA family, and that's more federations than there are countries, and every country or every federation gets the equal amount. So Malta gets the same as America, gets the same as Gibraltar, gets the same as Jamaica, they all get the same amount of money when it comes to television rights. That money is huge. And for the United States or for Germany, that might not be that big, but for these other small organizations, that might mean renovations to a new stadium, that might mean travel expenses the rest of the year.
That might
why bite the hand that feeds you?
That might mean my vote. Right. That's
Exactly.
because it's enough money to sway their. That's I mean the the belief that Sepp Blatter in his early days before he was president of FIFA, he made a promise to Africa that he would bring a World Cup to Africa, and during that time period he made a lot of promises, and I think also made things happen. And I'm not saying this is all negative, but got a lot of the African federations behind him. And like you said, they all, and the African Federation, I think, has, I don't know, 50 or so federations in it. He got them all behind him because of, I think, a lot of the same reasons what you just mentioned. As the organizations are smaller, but that piece of the pie means so much more to them. And on top of that, the promises that he made to them. So I forget. There's an official. I think his name is not an official, spokesman for FIFA, Walter Di Gregorio. He basically said, I'm reading a little quote here. He basically said, if people don't show up, they don't vote, but we're still voting. I mean, that's as of this afternoon. I haven't read anything since then otherwise. So maybe the Europeans not going only helps Sepp Blatter because I think there's a strong contingent against him in Western Europe.
Right, and he's gonna win anyway. And to me personally, I don't think he's leaving. I don't think I don't see an immediate change anytime soon. The question is, and I think this really needs to kind of be put out in this situation where you say the Brazilian World Cup, the reason why the corruption was bad, was not because they gave the World Cup to Brazil. Was because they used government money to build stadiums they did not need to build and not give people the money they need to have for better living, for better life, for better transportation, better healthcare, better everything, better schools. And they did not collect taxes from FIFA. We're not sitting here saying that Brazil shouldn't have a World Cup. I'm sure they had the infrastructure to do it. We're saying is FIFA imposed all these restrictions on this country not to collect taxes, force them to build stadiums they're probably not going to need. They definitely don't need. Some of these stadiums are being used to host parties and to be a bus parking lot. That's the problem with this bribery. We obviously know what's going on in Qatar. It's been well reported about the slavery, essentially slavery, and the deaths of people. That's the part of the corruption that's bad. That's the part of the corruption that we as people need to worry about. We as soccer fans, we as citizens of the world need to worry about. Not did Qatar get it? Fine. If Qatar got it, fine. If they bribe somebody, I really don't care. But how are they building? How are they using this privilege? What are they doing? They're hurting people less fortunate. They're hurting the environment. They're hurting, they're causing massive problems. A Winter World Cup means nothing when 6,000 people might die. And I think that's the bigger issue that people need to think about and need to worry about.
Which seems to be, again, almost being completely ignored by the body that gave that awarded them the World Cup. Essentially, people are complaining about a Winter World Cup, but who cares if ultimately migrant workers are dying by the dozens?
We've had more outcry because, and right, the Women's World Cup shouldn't be played on turf. We had more outcry because the Women's World Cup has been on turf. We had more legal action because the Women's World Cup was being played on turf in Canada. There had any legal action about Qatar having this World Cup and migrant workers being used and essentially being abused. I mean, something has to change, and they're representing this thing. And you know what? Qatar is not going to get any money from that world. They're not going to get any money from those taxes. And those people who build those are not going to get bonuses. They're not going to have better lives. They're not going to get citizenship. Nothing. No one's going to benefit. Brazil didn't benefit. South Africa got a nice pride. They got to have their self-esteem up. Did they benefit financially? No, they haven't benefited financially. This is just boondoggles for essentially, countries who want to boost up their image and their economy, and dictators who want to show that they can do something. All right, it's just unfortunately you need to have a dictator to do all these. I don't want to call it. Well, it might be a little harsh to call the Emirates, the Qatari families of Qatari dictators, but there's not a democracy. So
all right, so we're talking about this day one. This is. What do you think this? How long do you think this is going to go?
I don't know the legal system of other countries, and if it's only Switzerland, who knows what they're going to choose to do. Said before, I don't see Sepp Blatter. I just think that's he's well too insulated to be involved in this, to get his hands dirty with this. So, unfortunately, I don't think anything's going to change in the immediate future, and I don't think anything is going to change where people like Sepp Blatter is going to be held accountable for it, because he probably never handed out a bribe or never he never took a bribe or anything. So it's really, other than being, an absurd figure who is narrow-minded, who is insulting the women, who is racist, who is ignorant, he's probably clean of everything, unfortunately, other than just playing the politics well.
At least for the last 20 years that he's been president, let's just say. And who knows how he got to where he got.
Well, right.
But which probably is beyond the scope of the investigation, of these investigations.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know how far in the United States it's going to get. I think that the United States we're probably stuck where we are. Maybe a few other people. If someone wants to roll over, if Webb wants to roll over somebody else, that's great. But he has to have more than just say. He needs to have some kind of evidence before he rolls over somebody.
Yeah, ultimately, it's also about money, right? So wherever the money trail ends is where it's going to end. Period. I mean, well, as far as the U.S. legal system goes.
Right. If they'd ever use a U.S. bank, there's no reason to prosecute it in the United States.
Right. A transaction between Peru and Switzerland that has no U.S. intermediary bank will not lead to any sort of investigation from the U.S., which I think a lot of people need to also recognize, because there's a lot of pandemonium about the U.S. intervening. No, they're not necessarily intervening in anybody else's business. They're minding their own. It just happens to be that it's a big chunk of bribe money.
Yeah, we pay taxes. Why can't they? Even if they're taking kickbacks.
All right, Jay. We've talked ad nauseum about FIFA corruption. At this point, I think we need to get back on the field. We need to talk about what we love. We need to discuss. There's actually football happening right now, tonight, the third round of the U.S. Open Cup. And appropriately, you had interviewed earlier this week Evan Ream, previous guest on our show, as well as co-host of the First 11 podcast, writer for the Davis Enterprise, and also writer for the Cup.us, which is run by Josh Hakula, who has also been a guest on the Homegrown. You spoke with him a little bit about West Coast Open matches. You want to give us a little brief summary before we roll into that?
Yeah, he'd been covering Open Cup matches for a while, and this season he was covering the preliminary matches, which is for the non-league, which essentially is non-tier, not within the 4 tiers of U.S. soccer, non-tier, basically pub leagues or amateur leagues. So he was covering the San Francisco City Soccer Club for a book he's writing, and for the Cup.us. We discussed a little bit about that. We discussed a little bit about covering the Soccer Republic game. And we just kind of wanted to get a little bit out of the Northeast. I've noticed in our shows that we really talk a lot about the Northeast. We've interviewed a lot of guests from the New York, New Jersey area. So I figured we should kind of expand our horizons. It's a big country. We should possibly fly over a couple of states to the West Coast and see what's going on over there, and get a sense of how the Open Cup is there and what's happening on the other side of the ocean, or the other side of the country.
Excellent. I'm excited to hear what you guys had to talk about.
Ole, ole.
I'm here with Evan Ream, writer for the Davis Enterprise, contributor to the Cup.us, and I know you have a new project with the Open Cup and in non-league football. You want to talk about that, Evan, before we start jumping into the Open Cup?
Yeah. So it's I did a couple of different things actually for the Open Cup. The last round, the preliminary round, San Francisco City FC against Cal FC, and I filmed just did the camera work and sent it back to this company called Non-League America, which is actually really cool. They're making a bunch of mini documentaries on some of the smaller teams in the United States, and so their first one was on San Francisco City FC, which we can talk about in a second. And then they did another one with my First 11 podcast co-host, Abram Chamberlain, who did one on the New Orleans Jesters, and as well as his Gulf Coast Armada supporters group. So you can check those out on Google Non-League America. It comes up. And then the other project, the book project, is for a company called Byline Press, which is run by Wes Burdine and William Stenross, or Bill Stenross, who are Minnesota United fans. And they last year came out with a book called The Complete Darkness, which was an annual of everything that happened in the 2014 season. And this year they're doing multiple other books, which they'll announce soon, one of which is the Open Cup book. And so I wrote a long-form story about SF City FC for that. So you guys can check those out at bylinepress.com, and they're doing a lot of really cool projects this year. So and I think people will be hearing about them pretty soon. So.
Yeah, I was covering the Jersey Express. I covered the first round and the second round, and I believe the Non-League America were favoring some of my tweets because the Jersey Express were playing the Greek Americans, Astoria Athletics. I think that's their AA stands for. And it's actually, I'm surprised. It's actually it's picking up momentum, this non-league stuff. So you want to talk a little bit about FSC?
Yeah. So a lot of people, and I know especially you were mentioning before we started recording about how you have a very East Coast centric audience, and you guys are talking a lot of East Coast stuff, and so you may not know as much about the West Coast stuff. And so SF City FC is really interesting club out here in San Francisco. San Francisco has tried so many times, obviously, in different iterations of different teams to try and, get one that sticks. And this one, just something feels different about it. They're actually a supporter-owned club, so they don't sell season tickets. They sell memberships. So you get to, right now you can go on their website and buy a season membership or a lifetime membership for different prices, and what that guarantees you is part of the 51% stake of ownership in the club, as well as voting rights on board of directors and stuff like that. I mean, they have a supporter representative on the board of directors. They have, they can vote to fire the coach if they want. They can vote to do anything. So it's 51% owned by the supporters, and then 49% owned by just a small group of investors who are investing their money in multiple different startups in the area. And it's sort of an interesting group of players, mostly former Division I players, except for, oddly enough, their captain is like the only starter who didn't play Division I. They play in the NorCal Premier League, which is just it's a U.S. club soccer league in Northern California, which for whatever arbitrary reason, U.S. club soccer was allotted one Open Cup spot this year, and they decided for some. I wasn't able to really get a very straight answer that the U.S. club soccer spot for the U.S. Open Cup would come out of NorCal Premier. They've had some success. They won, a majority of their games last year, and they qualified for a 4-team tournament, and the winner of which would qualify for the Open Cup. They ended up beating a team from Central California 3-0 in the final in front of about 500 people. That ensured their qualification, and they ended up losing actually on two controversial penalty calls to Cal FC. They lost 2-1, but they drew over 15,000 people, which was an Open Cup preliminary round record. So that was very promising for them. And not only that, but two of the players who were playing with the team in their Open Cup qualification hopes ended up earning USL contracts, and one of them is Dave Romney of the LA Galaxy 2, who has started most of their games as either left back or center back. And then I can't remember the name of the other guy, but I believe he's playing with the Austin Aztecs. And so, I mean, they have some success in getting guys signed for pro contracts with pro teams, but at this point, none of their players are paid right now. But the interesting thing that their coach, Andrew Gardner, who oddly enough went to the same high school that I did, he mentioned to me was like, well, some of the players on the team, they're really able to draw from a wide variety of players because of the talent of people that San Francisco draws with all the startups and stuff. And so they said to me like, well, what are we going to do? Pay a guy who one of their players is CEO of a giant company in San Francisco. What are they going to pay him $600 a month? Like, what's that going to do for him? Really nothing. So they're in this odd sort of place right now where they're not paying their players, but they're asking for commitments from the players. So they don't really know where they're going to go. But I do know that they have officially been in contact with NASL about possibly being a expansion team in the near future. Their goal is, I believe, 10,000 members. Right now, I think they have around 300, and they hope to be in the highest level of American soccer, or at least the second highest, by 2020. So a lot of ambitious goals. Definitely a lot of interesting people, a lot of smart minds there, and it's really a unique club, and I think it's one that finally might stick in San Francisco.
Yeah, actually, one of my first episodes, I remember talking to a professor who wrote a essentially would I guess wouldn't be a book, because it was about 50-page piece. I think it was a dissertation regarding I believe it was the American Hungarians in San Francisco pre-MLS days, talking about how they had a professional team, and I think he said he made like $60,000 prior to becoming a teacher, and he's talking about the history in San Francisco, and there's a lot of soccer out there, and like what you said, this wealth of talent coming from the Valley, which wasn't around when he was playing in the 80s. But the one thing about college players is they go to phenomenal schools. Like a lot of the good American college players, if who are talented, they go to really good schools. It is not surprising that they're being transited and going to Silicon Valley, and you're not going to pay a guy who's the CEO $600, so it's tough to get commitment. But I'm just more surprised that they don't have at least a fourth division team there, let alone a USL team there. But let's talk a little bit about how important, because you're dealing with a lot of at least in this aspect, non-league football. How important is it to these teams on an institutional level to get recognized at the Open Cup?
I think the like I mentioned, the crowd of 1,500 people speaks for itself. I mean, that's about 3 times their normal crowds for the last couple of years, and not only does it build prestige for the team, because there is I doubt a ton of people who were at the SF City Cal FC game knew about Cal FC, but I bet a ton of people around the country knew who Cal FC was, and so they're like, oh, who's Cal FC playing, this SF City team? Well, what's this team about, right? And they probably did. Probably a couple of people looked it up and thought, hey, this is cool, supporter owned, and it really helped spread the word. But I think, and it didn't happen for SF City this year, but the magic of the Open Cup is, you can win, and anyone can really beat anyone. Cal FC, like we mentioned, made it to, I think it was the 4th round. They beat the Portland Timbers. Well, imagine if SF City had done the same thing and, went all the way up to play the San Jose Earthquakes or something. I mean, how huge would that be for that team how much press would they be getting? I mean, I know just right now for a first game at SF City, I was there. Robert Jonas of Centerline Soccer was there. Elliot Almond of the San Jose Mercury was there. And I can't remember his name. I think it's Alan Black of the SF Chronicle was there. I mean, to cover 4th division soccer in the United States and the Open Cup, I mean, that's unprecedented coverage. Does that happen if they don't qualify for the Open Cup? I mean, probably not, maybe. But, I mean, when you have, the Mercury and the Chronicle there, as well as, 2 other reporters who are covering the story, I mean, that's, there's some Open Cup games I've been to where there aren't even 4 reporters. I mean, heck, like Sac Republic FC, we only have 3 reporters there, and that's a much larger club. I mean, it's just, I think it's huge for some of these teams. I mean, I remember thinking back to a couple years ago, over on your side of the country. I mean, Icon FC. I had no idea who Icon FC was, and then they made a little bit of a run, and all of a sudden, Jay Zatella's back in professional soccer. I mean, you really never know what's going to happen, but it really, I think, only good can come from small teams competing in the Open Cup and taking it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, just the numbers you're telling me is impressive, because I've only been to the one game this year. The one team, the Jersey Express, and numbers were not officially released for attendance, but I really can't see there was more than 200 people at the Red Bull 2 game, which is still surprising because the Red Bull 2 do draw maybe a few thousands for their games at Red Bull Arena. I mean, obviously no one was really marketing it, and there was a couple of small supporters from the maybe like a half dozen, two dozen people from the Red Bull supporter groups going there pre-gaming and going to the game. So I guess on my side of the games I covered, we didn't have a crowd. But talk a little bit about the games you covered. What you saw in those games and the quality you saw in all the games you covered.
So I've covered 5 Open Cup games now. I guess 3 last year with Sac Republic. I saw the Republic. This was actually before Bonnie Field, Sacramento Republic FC's home stadium, which is absolutely fabulous for something that was put up, in a couple months, really. And I last year I saw them take on the Ventura County Fusion, which was very odd, given that those teams are now have an official affiliation. But back then, I believe there was something pretty sketchy that went on where Ventura County was originally supposed to host that game, and something happened, and it wasn't really announced. But for some reason, Sacramento ended up hosting that game, and actually Sacramento went down 1-0 and ended up coming back by putting in their starters. And then in the next round, they killed Fresno Fuego of the PDL. Actually, both those teams are PDL teams. And then one of my favorite experiences was the round, which was the game after that. So the 4th round last year was Sac Republic against San Jose Earthquake at Kezar Stadium, which is where SF City play, by the way. Kezar Stadium, of course, famous for being former 49ers stadium back in the 50s and 60s. It's long since been renovated and looks completely different now, but it's right in the middle of Golden Gate Park. It's like, imagine on the East Coast, a stadium just being in the middle of Central Park in New York. It'd be a great location if there was actually parking. But Sacramento played San Jose last year, and it was actually a really incredible game that Sacramento Republic dominated, and they went up 1-0, but they were pretty unfortunate to get caught on 2 counterattacks and end up losing the game. And I remember after the game, in which actually Sacramento is about maybe 80, 85, 90 miles from San Francisco, and the Tower Bridge Battalion, the supporters group for Sacramento Republic, took 2 buses down and actually outnumbered the San Jose Earthquakes fans. And I was on the San Jose side because that's where the press box was, and the Republic fans were actually louder, and may have had something to do with the Ultras had some sort of protest going on. But it was a pretty incredible atmosphere with the 2 sides going back and forth and around equal numbers, and it was something that you haven't really seen in Northern California before. And it was a great game. And I remember how upset the Republic players were after the game, because a lot of the guys, especially Justin Braun, Rodrigo Lopez, former MLS guys. I walked by Rodrigo Lopez after the game, and he had the 1,000-yard stare going. He really cared. He really wanted to prove that he could play and beat MLS teams, and he really wanted to legitimately win the tournament. So that goes to this year's tournament. I covered, again, at Kezar Stadium, SF City against Cal FC. The level of play was decent. The SF City guys aren't really that fit. Their league allows free substitutions, and you could see around the 60th or 70th minute that the players sort of just lost it. And Danny Barrera is playing for Cal FC, who's 1 year out of NASL, and he's 25 years old. I've heard there have been some issues with him on the personal side of the game, but as far as his technical abilities and his soccer IQ, it was off the charts. And you had this guy who should be playing professional soccer, who's playing for Cal FC and really dominating a bunch of former Deep Division I players. So that was really exciting. But then, to go back to Sacramento Republic, a couple weeks later, I asked Rodrigo Lopez after a game about the Open Cup, and what he said was, "Look, we want to win it. They don't care if they're in USL. They think they can play against any MLS team, and their goal is to win the Open Cup." And imagine what that would do for a city like Sacramento. And so they came out and beat the Sonoma County Soul, who have qualified quite a few times for the Open Cup, I believe at least 5 times in the last 10 years, and have been former NPSL national champions. So a good team. They essentially came out with a team of reserves, though, and Sacramento won fairly handily. And now, this next round, there are more storylines. They're playing Chula Vista FC out of San Diego, who went to Arizona United, who had been one of the more impressive teams at the start of the USL season. They went to Arizona and beat them 3-0, and from all reports that I heard, it wasn't even a close. And that's the interesting thing about it is, Chula Vista FC is a tiny team from the San Diego area. They're USASA, So what Josh Akala of the Cup.us always tells me is there's no defined fourth or fifth division. So essentially every team is a fourth division team. But if there is a fifth division, this team is a fifth division team. And they actually have right now a GoFundMe campaign to get to Sacramento, because I don't know if the team has the funds in order to travel. And I mean, I'm sure they'll get there. I mean, it'll probably be by bus, and they probably won't be able to stay in a hotel or anything. They'll probably leave right after the game. But I put it out on Twitter that this team was looking for money, and 3 or 4 Sacramento Republic fans responded to me and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to donate because this is a really great cause. I think we want to see a great game next Wednesday." And that's the magic of the Open Cup. That as soon as the Chula Vista players get on the field, they'll be booed in Sacramento, but the Sacramento fans want to see them get to the field in the first place. So, there's just so many storylines going on, and I think more storylines than you get with just an average maybe MLS game that you're covering or NASL game that you're covering. There's just so much going on in the Open Cup. It's truly an amazing tournament, and it's truly a pleasure to cover.
Yeah, I think the Cup.us put a question on their website saying, what's the one thing you want to see improved? And I think it was like media exposure, TV coverage. I forget like the other options. The other one was other. And I picked the other one because I knew the one thing I want to see is these teams funded to get funds just to travel. I know how difficult it is to actually put together a team. And I was watching it, the first round game I had was against the Greek Americans, and they play in Queens, and they were individually coming by themselves, the players. So they were taking the subway over to the PATH train over to the White Rail down in Newark, and they were coming individually, or they're coming in their cars. So at least have a fleet of carpools or a fleet of buses, or not buses, but a fleet of vans to take them. That it does hurt, and that's the one thing I personally. If the one major improvement is to give these teams a fighting chance, to have the opportunity to travel well, and like you said, like these are the opportunities for these guys to play in front of people, get noticed. And the East Coast, I'm not seeing too many fans, unfortunately, but that's why I love this tournament. Not the prettiest soccer, not the best soccer, but there is something special about these guys giving everything for these matches.
Yeah, and you talked about travel. It's not the FA Cup where your longest trip is 300 miles and your team is well funded anyway. It's your shortest trip is 300 miles. But yeah, they're traveling. Chula Vista FC is going to travel in-state to Sacramento. Well, in-state is 500 miles north, and that's a pretty expensive bus ride. Actually, San Diego Flash, they almost qualified for the tournament this year. We're talking about just qualifying. They had a game against SC Tacoma 253, a new club up in the Northwest. They almost weren't able to go because they didn't have the funds, and so they did a similar thing. And I believe they got funded, and they ended up only being able to take like 13 guys or something, and they lost by a lot of goals. But you want that opportunity, and as a player, especially as a fourth division player, you're right on the fringes of being able to do what you love for a living. And the Open Cup was a way to get noticed, but you got to get there first, and those are some of the challenges that the average fan I don't think realizes. So it's actually I'd love to see the funding for the travel improved, as well as the media coverage. We finally got a live draw that was televised. This year in the Open Cup really does feel different than all the previous years. It feels like U.S. soccer actually kind of cares at least a little bit, so that's an improvement over pretty much not caring at all before. But there's still a very long way to go.
Yeah, and it's just to put something on the end of that, just get a sponsorship, put something on it. And to go back with this, one of the best experiences I ever had at a game was covering a game, at least, was covering at Red Bull Arena the NPSL finals. And I'm looking at the fourth round, and I see that the Chattanooga FC, who played the Red Bulls NPSL team last year in the finals, they might have an opportunity to go to Red Bull Arena to come and play the Red Bulls and visit them essentially for the second time in a year. So I want Chattanooga FC to come to Red Bull Arena, bring those fans. They came out. What matches are you looking forward to, or what dream matches do you have in the next 2 rounds?
Oh, and I'd have to take a look at the full list again, but I was tweeted out a number of regional rivalries. I believe the Railhawks are playing the Independents. There's an OKC derby of some kind. I can't remember if the Energy playing the Roughnecks or something like that, or the Rough Riders.
Yeah, that's the other one.
There were 3 or 4 other ones that were matchups that I was seriously interested in. I wish, obviously Seattle to Portland 2 will be interesting.
And then Seattle won. Portland one's playing in round 4.
Yeah. That'll be great. But the round 4 matchup that I'm secretly really hoping for is actually Fort Lauderdale against Orlando City. With all this talk, we talked about this off air before, but about the NASL in Florida and with how well Jacksonville Armada are doing this year, Florida, this is probably the biggest year for Florida soccer ever, really. I would love to see Orlando City play Fort Lauderdale. I think Fort Lauderdale has to beat the Battery or something like that. But
Yep, Charleston Battery.
Yeah, it's a realistic. That's a realistic result for them. Obviously anything can happen, and even though the Battery have been pretty good this year, I believe Fort Lauderdale. I actually don't know how well they're doing, but I want to see soccer in Florida really take the next step, and it seems like Orlando, it has been doing that. I don't know if it's quite there yet in Fort Lauderdale. I've heard good things about the Tampa Bay Rowdies this year, but it just seems like a lot is going on, and I want to see some good matchups in Florida in the Open Cup, and I want to see Orlando City go out there and try and win. Play Kaká, play all their starters, and those kinds of matchups will be the inner region or intra-region, whichever one it is. Rivalries will be, I think, are all the games I'm looking forward to, especially the hopeful Sac Republic San Jose matchup. But not only that, I'm looking forward to all of the USL against NASL matchups, just because I think there's a lot of interest, and I think a lot of people in the NASL really, a lot of people who are fans of the NASL really underrate the USL, and I think a lot of people who are fans of the USL really overrate the USL. So I want to see how it turns out, because last year we only got 3 NASL against USL matchups, all 3 of which featured USL teams that are no longer in the USL. Orlando City beat Tampa Bay last year, and then Indy 11 beat Dayton, who, of course, went down to PDL, and I cannot remember which NASL team it was, but someone beat the Charlotte Eagles, who are, of course, now in the PDL as well. So two of the not-so-good USL teams last year lost, and one very good USL team last year won against NASL teams, so we didn't really get a large sample size of matches. But I think with all the talk of lower division soccer this year, and the fact that I think it's very realistic that the USL has improved a lot, I'm really excited for the USL against NASL matchups that are going to happen this Wednesday, and we have 7 of them compared to last year's just 3.
Yeah, especially with all this, with speculation right now, especially with all this talk of USL trying to get status too. I think this is when the really hardcore fans are they're the ones who went to the games. They're the ones who went to the small games, the Division 4s in their first 2 rounds. This is when we actually start seeing people and seeing actual numbers, actual interest going, and people wanting to see these games on TV rather than just to stream. I think this is when I wish we had the TV access and really had a game, on one of the channels. Or even MLS Live put on one of their channels, because they have MLS Live have decent coverage of some of these games.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing that I dislike about covering the Open Cup is that I go to a Sac Republic game, and that's the only game I get to watch. And it's great. I mean, it's great to be there live. I mean, by the way, Sac Republic broke the second-round record, first team ever to draw over 10,000 fans for a second-round Open Cup game. But still, I would have liked to watch a couple of the other games, and that just wasn't an opportunity for me. So I don't know what, obviously it's difficult with scheduling, but it's just, that's the only thing that's unfortunate. I think, covering Open Cup is great. Learning about soccer teams that you had no idea about, never heard about, that's great. But it's unfortunate that there's so many games and they just happen all in one day. And I mean, I guess I kind of like that. There are a lot of good things, there are a lot of bad things. It's just, I wish I was able to see more Open Cup games than I have, I guess.
Well,
But that's just me being greedy.
yeah. Well, Evan, you and I, we're part of the solution. We're not part of this problem. If people want to keep complaining, they keep complaining. They just got to show up to the games. But you're doing great work out there. I really appreciate you coming on to talk U.S. Open Cup and give me a little bit of perspective what's going on the West Coast. I said before, I feel like all the interviews I have, all the things I do is so much East Coast centric, and I realize that now. And I'm trying to expand a little bit more, and I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to me.
Oh, no problem. I listen to your podcast, and even the guys on the East Coast are tremendously informative, and it's really great. I really appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thank you, Dave.
Ole, ole.
All right, Jay. And in our standard fashion, we're going to close out the show with some quick fire questions. We usually name the this section after something going on in the world. I want to believe that the first president of FIFA is rolling in his grave today, and we're going to call this segment Robert Giroux for the very first FIFA president. I think he was like 28 years old, somewhere in the late 1800s. Here we go. First question. Which tournament are you watching? The men's under-20 World Cup or the Toulon under-23 Invitational?
Well, I watched a little bit of Toulon Invitational. It was a US-French game. I wasn't particularly impressed by the US's performance. You know what? I've already filled up my DVR with U20 World Cup games. So I'll go with the U20 World Cup with the mostly MLS employed US side.
I'm going to go U20 as well because I would like to see those youth players, those 17, 18-year-old guys that are good enough to crack the under-20 team that might be a rising star. Whereas the U23 is more like an Olympic warm-up. That's where my head's at.
Well, also your boy from Arsenal is on the U20 team as well. Don't forget that.
No. Zelalem.
Zelalem, I know. Zelalem.
Yeah.
So you got to pick Julian Green versus Zelalem. Zelalem's the future. Julian Green, well, wasn't never. So.
It's the past.
Yep.
Okay, next question. Starting in just a short time, the Women's World Cup will be played in Canada this year. It's preferential timing for the U.S. Will this mean that we're going to get better viewership?
Well, Fox is really doing a good job. They're trying to have the Women's World Cup be their training run for the Men's World Cup in 3 years. So I think TV-wise, advertising-wise, we're going to see stuff. But, there's not a whole lot of advertisements out there, other than maybe the occasional stuff on Fox for the Women's World Cup. I have not seen magazines. There is no Women's World Cup guide other than the one put out by Equalizer Soccer in our game that you can get online. I have not seen way to sell the game. I have not seen Women's World Cup players appear on like Fitness Magazine or some kind of women-based fitness magazine. I mean, it might seem sexist to say, well, you should put the women on fitness magazines, but it's free advertising, it's free marketing. There's no reason why you don't see American players on, men's health magazines during the World Cup. I haven't seen any of that. No one knows it's happening. Maybe, like Satana Waltz had a good article about selling the women game to South American audiences and Spanish language audiences, but you know what? As of right now, I don't think it's going to be a very good rated programming.
I don't know where it's going to go. I can only speak for myself. I'm going to DVR the matches that I can't watch live or the ones that I can, and my kids aren't awake, and I have 2 little girls, and I'm going to make sure that they at least watch it for a few minutes and let them know. I'm not going to I'm not going to sit them down and turn into Andre Agassi's dad, but I want them to see that that women can play the game at the high level. Do I think that overall the country will tune in? I've always felt that the American sports fan was much more in tune with the women's soccer game on an international level. I mean, I felt like there was so much fanfare in '99. It was just such a big deal. And I would say over the course of the last, 15 years, unfortunately, I feel like it's really declined. I thought the trajectory would be the other way. I think it'd just keep growing. And I think the men's game has crossed the path on the upward tick, where the women's game dropped down as far as recognition and popularity.
Do you think it's a lack of domination? Do you think because the other countries, obviously the rest of the world's getting better? Do you think it's that we're not winning it all the time? That
if
we just don't care?
If we're not winning at log throwing, we're not watching it. I guess I think that's at least a part of it. At least that's in the discussion for sure. But I feel like soccer for women in the U.S. is a very viable sport. It's a sport that's played by a lot of girls at the youth level. I just I don't understand it. I don't understand it, but I think I kind of agree with you that it's not going to do as well as the general soccer fan would want, would want it to do here in the U.S. All right, moving on. Last question. Go back to the ill-fated NASL, perhaps. Maybe not the ill-fated. I don't want to speak ill about the ill-fated NASL. That's a lot of ill-fateds. Okay. Miami FC, shots fired at MLS. Another NASL team in Florida. Is this too many?
Why don't you go first? Because I've asked the last two questions first.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I always put you on the spot, then I think about the answer.
Hey, it's my job to get you on. It's my job to put you back on track.
I think it is too many, and I think it's I think from a PR kind of standpoint, showing MLS, hey, we could do it, you can't do it, is nice. But if they got to start thinking long term here, they're in jeopardy of losing the second division status, which maybe doesn't mean too much, but they're in jeopardy because they don't have enough West Coast teams, I believe. I think they should be focusing on that, secure their position, look to be that counter. You want to be that counter culture to MLS. You want to be the counterbalancing act. You got to make sure that you're there. You're in the discussion. Because as of right now, NASL is really a connoisseur league. I mean, when you start talking to the layman, right, the general sports fan or the general person that doesn't really follow much soccer, and you start talking about NASL, they get confused. They don't know what you're talking about. So right now, NASL is a connoisseur thing. Only the lovers of the game here that really know, that it exists and they know about the pyramid and our restricted pyramid and all the issues that we have. If their goal is to be the counter to MLS, they need to make sure that they're in the discussion. Okay, whoop-de-doo, they get Miami FC, but they move down to the third division, and USL Pro ends up being the second division, which is, I believe, in MLS's plan. I think they want that. Now they become even further away from being even discussed and talked about. I think it's a bad move. That's my final answer.
I just came back from Fort Lauderdale 2 weeks ago, and if you're not familiar with the area, Fort Lauderdale is a 30-minute car ride to Miami. The old Miami Fusion played in Fort Lauderdale, so you're really saturating that market in the South. Now, Miami is an absolutely prime real estate for soccer. We've talked about it before when we talked to John Tannawall for a media episode. Miami has several Spanish language networks in Miami, as well as Traffic was in Miami. CONCACAF was in Miami. So Miami is a really important spot. But if they want to get in Miami, they should have moved Fort Lauderdale down to Miami rather than put another team. And I think more than anything else, it might be a thumb in the eye to MLS, but I also think it's saying that we want more teams, but we can't afford to pay for travel. Because that's the only reason why they don't have a West Coast team, is they can't afford the travel. And that kind of screams volumes, because there's a whole West Coast out there that they haven't even expanded or haven't even explored yet.
You nailed it. You nailed it, Jay. All right. At this point, I believe we are concluded with the May edition of Homegrown. It was a very different Homegrown than usual. We didn't focus on a couple of different topics that we usually lay out. Perhaps maybe in a few weeks we'll revisit some of these topics that we had lined up for this evening if they're still relevant. I think some of them will be.
Yeah, they're kind of evergreen. I think we could probably even turn it around in 2 weeks and maybe have 2 Junes because we kind of laid on the May episode.
So maybe that's what we'll do. We'll plan out 2 Junes for you guys to catch up and give you a double dose of Jay and Dan. I want to thank you guys for listening. For more, please visit socceryanks.com. You can find me on Twitter at socceryankdan. Jay? I'm
at Rescinded Red. And you can also find me when I'm not on baby break, which I'm currently on, the njcollegesoccer.com. But I'm not sure when I'm going to get to that because unfortunately, baby's taking up a lot of my time.
As they do. Thank you for listening, everyone. Catch you next time.